I'm very, very glad to be here and to be talking to you at the beginning of your series on, what's it called again?
Bringing the Buddha to life.
Bringing the Buddha to life. No, because I was I kept calling it making the Buddha alive, which doesn't sound quite bringing the Buddha to life. So I'm very, very glad to be here this evening to talk on that subject, because it's so important to be vividly aware of the Buddha, of the Enlightened One, the founder of our tradition, the founder of what we've come to call Buddhism, the founder of the Buddha Dharma, the rediscoverer of the way to enlightenment after it had been lost so many centuries ago. He is right at the centre of the Buddhist tradition, and you really cannot understand any aspect of Buddhism without having a deep appreciation and understanding of the Buddha, of the founder of the tradition. He is the embodiment of what the goal of all Buddhist practice is, which is what we call enlightenment or awakening, the fullness of wisdom and compassion, the fullness of energy and purity, the state of complete freedom, complete creativity. That's what the Buddhist life is lived for. The enlightened state, it might seem very, very distant given all the sort of challenges and difficulties that we might face in our own lives, and even the struggles we might have with our own practice, but nonetheless that he is our horizon, if you like. He is the landscape in which we practice, and when you feel a resonance with that, in a way distance becomes irrelevant, becomes completely irrelevant. You just know that there is something more to live for, more that you can become, which is kind of endless. There's a wonderful saying of the Buddha in the Dhammapada, in the section on the Buddhavagga, the chapter on the Buddha, that enlightened one whose sphere is endless, by what track would you lead him astray? The trackless one. Wonderful phrase. Whose sphere is endless. His gochara, that's the Pali word, his pasture, his sphere is endless. There's no end to it. So it's very important to remember that enlightenment isn't a sort of end point. It's the sort of farthest discernible point for us, but it's the entry into irreversible creative activity, particularly in creative activity in the sense of communicating the fullness of the enlightened state to others and bringing about a transformation in individuals and in within the wider community, which of course doesn't just happen through an act of magic, because it requires their active cooperation, their own individual response. It's very interesting that probably the second person the Buddha meets after his enlightenment is a man who's very impressed by the Buddha's appearance. The Buddha's so radiant, fresh from enlightenment, absolutely kind of radiant with the beauty of the liberated state. And this man comes to him, and he just, this guy can't be human. He's more than human. He keeps asking, what are you? Are you a god? Are you a celestial musician? Are you a nature spirit? What are you? Mm-hmm. And the Buddha gives this great lion's roar that he has actually transcended all conditionings whatsoever. So he can't be described as anything. So he's a liberated one, an enlightened one. And Drona, who is the man, interesting name, Drona, interesting sound, he scratches his head and said, "May it be so, friend," and walks out of the Pali canon, never seen again. And I think that's very, very interesting. I think there's something really interesting about that the Buddha is only a shower of the way. We have to make the individual effort, or as the Buddha says again in the Dhammapada, by you must the zealous effort be made. The Buddhas only show the way. But the Buddha did untiringly show the way to so many, and brought about so much change and transformation. So it's absolutely vital that we develop an understanding of, an appreciation of the Buddha, of the enlightened state, and yes, bring the Buddha to life within our own world right now, which is a very different world in so many ways from India more than 2,500 years ago. Very different, although in some ways just the same. I mean, people don't change that much. There's the same, greed, attachment, delusion, etc., etc., and the same, inspiration and wonderful human qualities, even though the circumstances of life are very different. But we have to somehow bring the Buddha to life right now within our own world, within our own life. One of the things I think it's very important to remember when we're entering into the Dharma, when we're entering into Buddhism, even if we're undertaking, a fairly early study of it, or even just reading about it, you have to remember that Buddhism in its original context is the enlightened person communicating with people. It's about people. It's about people meeting and communicating. It's about human interaction. We get our Buddhism, a lot of people get their Buddhism from books or, from lectures on the internet now, or yes, of course you can also hear it from teachers, in the different, Buddhist centres and so on, which is good because that's people, that's bringing it alive. But when we read teachings of the Buddha, in the old texts, we have to really try and picture this is about people. This is about people meeting. This is about a particular communication that the Buddha is giving to someone. It could be, a man, a woman, a homeless wanderer, a merchant, a king, a queen, a mother, a housewife, a grieving mother, famously in the story of Kisa Gotami. It's people. It's people. And you could say there is no such thing as Buddhism. There's only Buddhists. There's no such thing as enlightenment. There's only an enlightened person. There's nothing abstract in that sense about Buddhism. If it's abstract, it's not Buddhist. Buddhism is particular. It's about particular people in particular places living their life and engaging with Buddhist practices. So often that's forgotten, particularly in the West, particularly outside of the context of people living a Buddhist life together, outside the context of a Sangha, or even sometimes within a Sangha, people just weird out and just get very abstract about, Buddhist practice. And you can sort of see why in, Buddhist traditions, you get the slap of the Zen master and that sort of thing, just to get good. I'm not suggesting we do this, by the way, in our own Sangha, but you can see what they're trying to do is just kind of get people out of their heads into their experience and waking up to what they actually need to do. Because let's face it, I've got quite a lot of Buddhist books are incredibly heady, very, very sort of heady and metaphysical, and in that sense, really very boring. It's about people. It's about people. And, you can see this when you read the account of the Buddha's last tour and what's called his parinirvana, his passing away, his great decease. Buddhas don't die, they enter parinirvana, they enter into this very, very mysterious state that transcends existence and non-existent, and which the Buddha refuses to say anything about when the physical body goes. There's no way of telling where the Buddha has gone. And you can see as that life starts to end in that form, the incredible effect it's having on the community. Of course, the grief of so many people, they've lost their teacher. They've lost their teacher. The enlightenment, as far as they're concerned, has gone out of the world. This person, this man who touched them so deeply, so many kinds of people. It's said, though, that the arhats, the enlightened ones, they didn't grieve. And sometimes people think, well, they're a bit cold, they're a bit unattached. But of course, as far as they're concerned, he hasn't gone. Enlightenment hasn't gone. The enlightenment isn't associated for them with that form. It's very interesting. Recently, some of you might have heard that our own teacher, my own teacher, Sangharakshita, Bhante Sangharakshita, has died. And a lot of people have been asking me. So I first met him when I was 17, and he's been a huge influence on my life. And people have been asking me if I've been sad and grieving, and I can't say that I have been. Not that I'm enlightened, and not that I'm saying he's enlightened, I should say. But it's as if he hasn't gone away. That's the point. It's as if he hasn't gone away. I mean, there have been tears, intense tears, but they've been tears of gratitude for what he's given me, which is a life of incredible meaning and value, and gratitude for his interest in me and encouragement of me without asking anything in return, and the encouragement to live from myself, and that I could live from myself this Buddhist life. And so much I could say about that. But there's another sense in which he's still there. He's still there. This period for many of us, last night I was in a small group over in East London, and they were asking me to talk about Sangharakshita in the group, and I could have gone on all night telling stories. That's the point. It was about stories of meetings and interaction. And of course, this is what happened in the time of the Buddha. People, after the Buddha's parinirvana, yes, of course, they remember the teaching. Wonderful memory of all of the teachings, because it's an oral tradition, like everything was in those days. So the remembering of all of the great teachings which we need, the Eightfold Path and so on and so forth. But also you have the remembering of him and his interactions with all kinds of people, with all their richness, complexity, wonder, challenge, and all the rest of it. And I remember in one of Sangharakshita's lecture series that made a big impression on me when I first came along, on the Bodhisattva ideal, where he's talking about the origins of the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva ideal being someone dedicated to gaining enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Sangharakshita said the Buddha affected people far more by what he was than by what he said. By what he was than by what he said. Yes, we're very grateful for the way in which the great Buddhists of the past have passed on the doctrines and the methods and the practices. But thank goodness they passed on the stories, the tales, the stories of the Buddha's tenderness, how tender he could be with people, the stories of his incredible sort of how challenging he could be as well, the story of his complete fearlessness, his tremendous skills at argument, his tireless teaching, and this kind of magic and mysterious, kind of indefinable quality that you could also find with the Buddha. So it's very important that we dwell on the stories of the Buddha and we learn from the stories of the Buddha. And what I want to do tonight is tell you a story about a disciple of the Buddha, and a little bit, it's a slightly unusual story, it's not very well known, and also the teaching that the Buddha gives to this disciple. And when we look at the teaching, I want to look at that teaching as a way in which we can bring the Buddha to life here and now. That's my aim. It's one of my favourite stories, one of my favourite characters in the Pali Canon. I feel very sympathetic to this particular disciple. His name's Vakali. And Vakali was a young man who lived in the great city of Shravasti in northern India, and Shravasti, outside of Shravasti, is Anathapindika's Park and the Jeta Grove, where the Buddha used to spend his rainy seasons, the last 20 years of his life. He was in rainy season retreat for 3 months in this wonderful grove outside of the great city of Shravasti. Every day, of course, the Buddha would go and beg his food in the great city of Shravasti. And Vakali, it's not that he was particularly interested in leading a spiritual life. In fact, he wasn't really interested at all. He was just a young man, and he saw the Buddha one day, and he fell in love with him. The Buddha could be he was a very, very handsome man, had great beauty in some people's eyes. And there's a wonderful story about Ananda that another tradition recalls, where Ananda's having a crisis and thinking of leaving the spiritual life completely, and because of he's smitten with somebody, he's in love with somebody, and the Buddha doesn't tell him off or anything like that. He said, Ananda, why did you go forth and follow me? What attracted you to the Buddhist life? He said, because of your beauty. And he just, in that moment, the spell was broken. And of course, we're talking about, as it were, a spiritual beauty that sort of shines through. It's not necessarily anything to do with, how I think, technically good-looking somebody is, because as we know, tastes change and all that sort of thing. But this spiritual beauty that radiates from the Buddha, this is very, very important as a general sort of idea in our Buddhist practice. It's very, very important to associate our Buddhist practice with beauty. If it's not attractive, it's not worth doing. I think, my opinion, if it's not absolutely fascinating and compelling, why would you do it? I mean, it's just going to be sort of ideas and problem solving and all the rest of it. That might be okay for a while, but in the end, you have to find the beautiful, fascinating element in this life. Otherwise, your emotions just aren't going to get involved. Your emotions aren't going to get involved in your ethical practice, in your meditation practice, in your studies. That's why images are so important and art is so important in Buddhist tradition. It's to attract you. One of the qualities of enlightenment is Shubha, one of beauty or purity, but particularly beauty. So that's very important to just keep that in mind. I think, Ratnachita talked about my first involvement with the Dharma. And yes, it was a sevenfold puja, a devotional practice. I mean, it was just beautiful. It was just fascinating. And this sense that, beauty is a very interesting thing, isn't it? And fascination, because you're presented with something that's very lovely, but there's more. That thing, when you find someone or something very, very beautiful, there's even more. It fascinates, it draws you on, to use the Sufi image, like the moth to the fire, the moth to the flame. So anyway, back to Vakali. He found the Buddha absolutely fascinating and beautiful. So he fell in love with him, and he thought, well, I just want to be with the Buddha all the time, and the only way I can do that is by becoming a monk. He didn't want to become a monk. He just wanted to be near the Buddha. So he got ordained, took the yellow robe, went into retreat, and he spent the whole of the rainy season retreat just sitting as close to the Buddha as he possibly could, and just sort of following him everywhere. It must have been a bit of a drag for the Buddha. Well, I'm sure the Buddha doesn't ever feel anything was a drag, but he was just sort of hanging around, just gazing at the Buddha. And hopefully he learnt some Dharma in that time as well. He must have. But he just wanted to be near the beauty of the Buddha. In a way, you could say he's very dependent on the outward appearance of enlightenment, if you like, and perhaps even getting a bit passive in relation to that. At the end of the rainy season retreat, the Buddha, when the rains ends, the bhikkhus, the monks, would just then disperse and go off wandering off into the forest, off into caves, going from place to place, to teach the Dharma to people or to find other places for retreat and just live this homeless life. So the Buddha, he was going to go off somewhere. I don't know where he was going to go off, but he'd obviously noticed Vakali and obviously knew what was going on. He said, Vakali, yes, Bhante? Vakali, go into retreat. Go into retreat. Go into the jungle. Into retreat. And just go away from me. Just go into retreat. And he just had to go. I mean, there was no discussion, no reporting in about feelings or no kind of, can I invite you to, that's not the way they kind of did it in those days, teacher-disciple relationship. No, go into retreat. And he's absolutely heartbroken. I mean, he's absolutely devastated to go into the jungle, and he's got to just meditate. And according to one of the accounts, there's a number of accounts of Vakali's story, he has visions of the Buddha while he's in retreat, and he's so glad to have a vision of the Buddha. But even the visions are saying, "Stop looking at me, meditate." What are you looking at me for? I'm going to practice. So it's a lovely story about somebody's response to the beauty and fascinating quality of the Buddha. But Vakali has, in another tradition, what are called the Therigatha, the verses of the elder monks. There's some beautiful verses that Vakali says, and it comes from a question from the Buddha. I don't know if this is while he's in retreat, the Buddha, the actual Buddha, not a vision, comes to him and talks to him. It's not clear what the circumstances are. And I'm going to read them to you, and then I'm going to comment on Vakali's response to the Buddha. And Vakali, I think, was probably not a particularly physically sort of strong person. He was a bit sickly, had a lot of stomach trouble and back pain and so on. But very, very devoted, and yes, he had this tremendous love for the Buddha, but this tremendous commitment to what the Buddha was teaching as well. Because, listen to this. So this, first of all, there's the Buddha speaking. Stricken by sharp stomach pains, you, monk, dwelling in the jungle, where it is harsh and hard to get food, what will you do? And Vakali replies, flooding the body with abundant rapture and bliss, and enduring what is harsh, I shall dwell in the jungle. Developing the bases of mindfulness, the faculties, the powers, and the factors of enlightenment, I shall dwell in the jungle. Recollecting those who are resolute, who put forth energy, constantly firm in their effort, who are harmonious and united, I shall dwell in the jungle. Recollecting the perfect Buddha, the foremost, the self-tamed, the perfectly composed and concentrated, with untiring effort, both day and night, I shall dwell in the jungle. So I want to go through these verses as a way of looking at how we can bring the Buddha to life in our jungle. I mean, Vakali is in his literal jungle, very thick forest somewhere in northern India. Years ago it used to be this phrase, the urban jungle. Don't think it's used so much these days, but we kind of live in a jungle, don't we, in our own way of living quite complex lives, lots of demands of earning a living and keeping a family and friendships and relationships and having to work very hard and study very hard, and it's harsh, we have illnesses of different kinds, physical and mental. It's harsh. So what will we do? We can have the Buddha. We can hear the Buddha talking to us. Well, what will we do? Us well, we're not monks and nuns, but us modern day Buddhists dwelling in the jungle where it's harsh, where it's not hard to get food. I had a very nice meal this evening. But, perhaps it's hard to get spiritual nourishment, let's say that. Perhaps it's not so easy to do that. What will we do? So let's see what we can learn from Vakali. So the first thing he says, and I love this, flooding the body with abundant rapture and bliss, and enduring what is harsh, I shall dwell in the jungle. So flooding the body with abundant rapture and bliss. Abundant rapture and bliss. Priti and Sukha, these are the Pali words. So, wouldn't it be lovely to do that? And wouldn't it be lovely, it's very lovely what you did with the introduction, but supposing you'd asked us, now flood your body with abundant rapture and bliss.
Just assuming everyone was doing it.
Yeah, well, with your lovely voice, I'm sure actually what's going to happen. So how are we going to flood the body with abundant rapture and bliss? Where does rapture and bliss come from? How does rapture and bliss arise? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from metta. It comes from loving kindness. A very, very strong association made between loving kindness and rapture and bliss. And it's, when you really develop metta, it's a rapturous, blissful state. You've got these, what are called the Padmavajra devas, the devas of brilliant light, which in the Buddha, who are these are gods on a higher level of consciousness, not enlightened, but they are characterized by priti, by rapture and bliss and love. They're called the gods of radiant light because they're constantly emitting sort of lightning bolts of love. And their communication with one another is entirely in terms of metta, entirely in terms of love. And in the Dhammapada, in the section on happiness, the Buddha said that that's what the Sangha should be like. It should be like this very contented community of higher gods and goddesses, entirely made of love, and therefore of rapture and bliss. And the thing about this is that the nature of loving kindness, the nature of metta, and I know, not everybody finds it easy to do the metta bhavana, but what you're doing in metta bhavana is that you're expanding your consciousness. In learning to love others, you're extending your heart, your chitta, your consciousness to embrace first just a few others, and then more and more people. And an expanded consciousness is an ecstatic consciousness. Ecstasy means to stand outside of yourself. That's what it means, and it's incredibly pleasurable when that happens. There's a reason why people like to get off their faces on drugs and ecstasy, because they want to have that self-forgetting and to sort of be one with everything around them. Unfortunately, it has diminishing returns if you're using pills. Metta has no diminishing returns. It's completely natural high, but it's so important to have this. It's so important to develop this. It's so important to do the metta bhavana every day. It's so important to do that, to learn to love, to expand, to embrace, to deeply empathise and sympathise, to identify positively with the life around you. I think one of the things that our world does to us, it can make us, tighten and make the focus so around our own narrow and rather anxious mental states. Metta's blowing that away. And metta's a weird practice in some ways, because when you take it up, you can think nothing is happening. You're sitting there, you're bringing to mind people, bringing to mind yourself, bringing to mind others, and you're trying all the different things, the phrases, the imagining, all that sort of thing. It's like it's like learning to develop muscles. You don't think very much is going on, but the flow of metta can very often happen outside of the meditation. It's not just what's going on in the meditation itself. You can feel the effects outside of it, that, oh, hello, I am more expansive a bit later on in the day. I am expanding and identifying more with the people around me. And this becomes, in the end, something really rapturous, really blissful. And it helps you deal with the harshness that you're experiencing in your life, maybe because of your own conditioning or the difficulties you're facing, and in the world around you. You learn to sort of soften and yield and expand in relation into what's going on around you. It's just so important, this. I do know that for some reason a lot of people have a lot of difficulty with the first stage of the Padmavajra. I've always found this completely puzzling, because I totally love myself. I think I'm incredible. So I've always found it a bit baffling, this. But maybe I'm just a gigantic egotist. So, but that's a bit weird as well. I think this business of our relationship, as it were, to ourselves, because it's not about sort of pumping yourself up with positive feeling. It's not even feeling good about yourself in that way. It's about waking up to, if you like, the wonder of actually being alive. I know sometimes people don't always feel that, but I'm talking about little things like listening to the wind outside, or getting a feeling for the pleasure of breathing and sensation, just getting a sense of that, and going through in your mind the incredible sort of precious things that go with being human, reflecting on the friendships we have, reflecting on the benefits that we have of the world in which we live in, reflecting on the fact that we're free, for example, to go to a Buddhist class, that we're not in a society where that would be impossible, where you don't have freedom of conscience. There are so many things, I think, which we just don't really value, and we don't rehearse their value to ourselves. So we have a sense of impoverishment, and then there's that sort of chasing after other things. So learning to develop metta, to develop loving kindness, begins by just noticing what is already there, and expanding out to include more and more people. So that's where the rapture and the sukha, where the rapture and the bliss comes from, where that flow of what we call positive emotion comes from. It comes from developing loving kindness. And of course, a big part of that is expressing it in your life, particularly through being generous, being really generous with people, saying a kind word to people, looking people in the eye warmly, positively, gestures like that throughout the day, even when you don't feel it. Don't worry about being inauthentic. Who cares about authenticity? Just do the yoga of generosity and kindliness, and stuff starts to happen. And friendships start to arrive. When good friendships start to arise, the flow of metta gets stronger, and again you get this sense of something expansive. Therefore, you can start having that experience of flooding the body. It's not just the physical body; it's the kaya is the whole sort of personality, flooding your whole psychophysical being with rapture and bliss and happiness. So, if you want to bring the Buddha to life, metta, loving kindness, that's the starting point, and getting in and really looking for that joy, that happiness, that the bliss that comes from that. Huge topic. I could spend the whole evening talking about that, but better not. And that's going to help you endure what is harsh. Endurance then isn't just gritting your teeth. It's about softening in relation to it. That's what it is. That's what endurance is. That's what patience really is. You soften in relation to what's going on with metta and rapture and bliss. And the next thing that Vakali says is developing the bases of mindfulness, the faculties, the powers, and the factors of enlightenment. I shall dwell in the jungle. So you've got you've got a lot of Dharma practices here. You've got all of the path here. So remembering and developing the four aspects of mindfulness, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 spiritual powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment. I won't go into all of these, but it begins with mindfulness. So we have metta, and then there's mindfulness. You dwell in the jungle where it's tough, not by just developing metta and that bliss and that sukha. You also need mindfulness, but you need mindfulness in a special way. When I was ordained, as with everybody else who's ordained after, in my case, Bhante Sangharakshita, after he gave me the refuges and precepts, he then exhorted me in the traditional way by saying, having well observed the 3 refuges, together with the ordination vows, with mindfulness strive on. With mindfulness strive on. So I'd been, after Bhante died, I kept hearing that. I kept hearing him say that to me. With mindfulness strive on. Appamadena sampadeta are the last words of the Buddha. The last teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha says, look, all conditioned things are impermanent. With mindfulness strive on. And then he entered parinirvana, and the tradition, the ordination tradition, took this over, so that after you're given the refuges and precepts, the expression of your commitment to the Buddhist life, your preceptor, this has gone on down the ages, says the words of the Buddha. They voice those words of the Buddha. With mindfulness strive on. Appamadena sampadeta. So the word for mindfulness is appamada here, appramada in Sanskrit. And it's a wonderfully rich word and so important in Buddhist tradition. We often, people are mostly aware of the other word for mindfulness, which is smriti or sati, which means remembering, really. It has that sort of meaning. Appramada is quite it's quite a hard word to kind of get across what it really is. Pramada means intoxication, heedlessness. It comes from the word mud is an intoxicating drink. So it has this notion of intoxication, heedlessness, mindlessness. You're not in full possession of your faculties. You're drunk, not necessarily drunk on alcohol, but you're drunk and deluded by being complacent. You're not fully switched on and tuned up, to what's happening. Appramada means literally non-heedlessness, non-intoxication. But a negative like this in Sanskrit or Pali means something positive. So another way of translating this is mindfulness or vigilance or awareness, if you like. But it's a very, very heightened kind of alertness would be another translation. Sometimes it's translated even as conscientiousness, or even carefulness. But you're really, really tuned up. It's not just being aware of the body and its movements and, all the different feelings and sensations and, sucking on a grape or something or whatever mindfulness techniques you use these days, and getting all the textures and all that sort of thing. I don't know where all that comes from. It's not that. It's being really aware of what you're doing with your life. So it's based on that you have meaning in your life. If you like, you have ideals, values, You have a sort of purpose in your life. Appramada only makes sense if you know what you're doing with your life. And sometimes people don't know what they're doing. You know, we drift along, you know, we just get knocked about. So, you know, the jungle of life can be very, very confusing. And sometimes we're sort of committed to keeping it confused. We sort of prefer the unconscious, unaware, intoxicated state. We don't want to wake up to what's going on with us. But appramada is you're fully alert. It's interesting as well in the case of the Buddha. The two things he says, or the three things he says, are impermanent are all conditioned things. With mindfulness, strive on. Life is impermanent. Life is short. Life is short. There isn't. It's definitely finite. We don't actually know when we're going to die. Nobody knows when anybody's going to die. We only have this moment. As Dogen, the great Zen master, says, you are only alive right now. You are only alive right now. So appramada is this wakefulness and alertness. It's not a panicky state. It's not a sort of hypervigilance, highly anxious. It's not that. It's very coming from a real stillness as well. A real awareness of here we are. This is my life. This is my time, my place. What am I going to do? What do I need to do? It means becoming aware of the state you're in now. What's my state? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I in a skillful state, an unskillful state? What do I need to do? What are the practices that I need to do to respond to what is happening? It's also an out there. It's not just about your own what's going on with you. Appramada includes it's a wide field of awareness of other people and also of their needs. So it's highly responsive to others. So you can see its relationship to metta. And I think of appramada very, very much as being like a warrior kind of state of mind. In the sense you know a warrior is protecting what you've gained and alert to further developments, and we need that. And it's also regarded as a sparkling kind of awareness, a sparkling mind, a very clear mind, a very fresh mind, really, really tuned up to what is happening, and yes, aware of how you can move on in your Dharma life. It's interesting that all of these other descriptions of the path, the faculties, the powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, they all include mindfulness. Mindfulness is, if you like, the basis of all of those states. They all arise out of awareness and alertness. And there is also a teaching that appramada is something that you revere, that you look up to. This is a really interesting way of talking. If you really want to develop a particular kind of state or quality of the path, you need to really cherish it, really revere it, really look up to it. Again, see that it would be highly desirable to be in that state. Highly desirable to be the person who has that kind of quality. So this is why you get Buddhist texts describing these states with such vividness, so that it gives you a real feeling for developing them. And of course the Buddha, is the embodiment of mindfulness, but perhaps a bit more of that later. So that's the second one, mindfulness. Then the third verse, recollecting those who are resolute, who put forth energy, constantly firm in their effort, who are harmonious and united, I shall dwell in the jungle. So there he is, Vakal is alone in the jungle, but he's saying, I'm going to remember my spiritual friends. I'm going to remember my community. This is the way I'm going to stay here. He might be on his own, but he can bring to mind his friends in the Sangha. This is really important if we're going to practice the Dharma, bring the Buddha to life in our very complex lives. We need spiritual friends. We need Dharma friends. It's Dharma friends who so often keep us going. People that we can go and talk to about what's going on with our life, with our Buddhist life, our Buddhist practice, when we're having difficulty with our meditation practice or our ethics, and who won't say, don't worry about that, let's go and have a drink, let's go and watch Netflix. No, people who take our aspirations seriously, take us really seriously, and really listen to us, and treat the challenges in our lives seriously. People we can confess to, we can open up to about our failings and shortcomings, and people who are alive and around us who can inspire us, who can sit shoulder to shoulder with us, stand shoulder to shoulder with us, and be with us in our striving, in our efforts. Ratnachuda mentioned that I've lived in men's communities of one kind or another, mostly men's communities, pretty much all my life. And people sometimes say, well, why do you live like that? Why do you? I said, well, I need to. I need to be with my friends. I mean, there are people I've been living with at Padmavajra, I've lived with, for more than 20 years. And, what is important to me about that is to be with people who know me really deeply. They've seen me in all weathers, ups and downs, and struggles and inspirations, successes, dismal failures. They've seen me in all kinds of contexts, and this is very important to me because I do a lot of communicating of the Dharma to people less experienced in Triratna, and which is wonderfully inspiring. Very moving, very uplifting to see people, at the earlier stages of their Dharma life. There's nothing more moving than that. But what I like about living with my friends is that they know me really well. So because sometimes, to be honest, if you're communicating a lot with people less experienced, they can actually think that you're more developed than you are actually. And if you're not careful, you can start believing in that, which is very, very dangerous. So having friends, where you can be yourself, whatever the weather, at your best and even at your worst, who will understand you and even rebuke you if necessary, is just brilliant. It's just so good to have people like that. But I think it's good for people at all levels. People that you can go to who have a Buddhist life, live a Buddhist life, or are trying to live a Buddhist life, who you can, share your inspiration with. So important. And it's obviously an inspiration to Vakali. He's got these people in his mind. He knows there are people out there who are committed, who are energetic, who are firm in their effort, and they're harmonious and united. They are in deep friendship with one another. That's another tremendously inspirational thing for me. I think one of the things I find so ugly about the world, particularly at the moment, is this terrible polarisation, the sort of vile polarisation that seems to be going on, the politicisation of everybody and everything. You just get, people want to put you in if you're not with them, you're against them, it seems. People want to kind of put you in a camp and all that kind of thing. It's absolutely awful. And it's such a relief to be with people. There's none of that. There's none of that. There's no politics. There's no issues, because you're meeting on a much, much deeper, a much more essentially human level. Because that's what the Dharma is about. It's essentially meeting on the deepest human level. It's nothing, in that sense, there's nothing sort of spiritual about it, you could say. It's deeply, human. I mean, one of the things that, Sangharakshita Bhante says, that one of the reasons why he's a Buddhist is because he believes that any human being can understand any other human being. And he said he lives for that, and he's prepared to die for that. You can understand any human being, regardless of their country, their class, their caste, their sex, their gender, whatever it might be. You can meet on that deep, deep level. That's what the Sangha is, and we need that very, very badly in this life. And when that's present, when you get that deep harmony, I really believe the Buddha is present. I mean, the Buddha said of the enlightened person that that harmony is their delight. They are passionately fond of harmony. His language is really strong. Harmony is their delight. They are passionately fond of harmony. That's what enlightened people are like. They want to kind of draw people together. Their own experience of life is profoundly harmonious, not some superficial smiley harmony, but deep, on the level of reality, on the level of the interpenetration of all phenomena. So we need that. You notice when you come into a harmonious situation, when you're part of that dynamic harmony, and it is dynamic, what Sangharajita calls that vital mutual responsiveness that is Sangha. So it's something living and alive. It's deeply refreshing and energizing, and gives you tremendous faith in what is possible with human beings. And we badly need it in this jungle right now. We badly need it ourselves, and we badly need it to offer it as an example to the world around us. So if we're going to bring the Buddha to life, let's do what Vakali does, and live for that quality of community, of Sangha. And then finally he says, recollecting the perfect Buddha, the foremost, the self-tamed, the perfectly composed and concentrated, with untiring effort both day and night, I shall dwell in the jungle. And of course Vakali has this tremendous devotion to the Buddha. So the Buddha is perfect for him. He's the Samyak Sambuddha. He's complete. He's perfectly and fully enlightened and awakened. And he's recommending. He is, for him, the foremost, the leader. And he is self-tamed. He's tamed himself. As if the Buddha uses this sort of imagery a lot, that in the unenlightened state we're like untamed horses, or untamed elephants. That's the kind of images that are used. And what the Buddhist life is taming all that tremendous energy. It's a little vision of what a human being is, the power of a human being. We have to tame all that. Not through repression, but by transforming all that energy, bringing it onto the path, turning it so it's really directed and incredibly stately and beautiful, and that can be unleashed when it needs to. I remember when I lived in India years ago, we were on retreat by a Hindu temple, a very dark Shaivite temple. I think some sacrifice had been done there, in days gone by. It was a very unpleasant place. But they had a temple elephant. And this elephant appeared. It was the rainy season. The river was in full spate. The elephant was really stately. I was watching this great, beautiful beast. And you could sort of see why the Buddha was likened to an elephant. Or just imagining the Buddha and, why he was likened to an elephant. This huge, stately creature, the Buddha had an elephant walk apparently, just these padded feet going down, and he had an elephant look. Apparently, the Buddha would never do that. He'd turn round and face you and really look at you. Not sure I'd be able to take that, but anyway, that's the elephant look. But so this elephant was coming on, and then it got into the river, and it started to play. And all of the mahouts kind of, just scrambled away, and these great big legs were kind of kicking the water around, and the trunk was, and you think, wow, that's how it's unleashed. And then it kind of calmed down. It was an amazing thing to see. Well, a Buddha could be like that. You know, if necessary, the Buddha could unleash that kind of energy if needed, but it's tamed. It's tamed. It's flowing along. It's not out of control. It's not destructive. It's entirely in the service of reality. So he's self-tamed and, yes, perfectly composed and concentrated. I always think of Sangharakshita when I read that line. Sangharakshita is the nearest I've come to meeting a Buddha. I mean, he would might be quite horrified if I said that, because he certainly didn't regard himself as enlightened. But I've meditated with Sangharakshita on a number of occasions and sat with him, and I have never sat with anybody so still, so composed, no movement. And I don't mean just no fidgeting, but you got the sense of no movement of mind. It's very, very, very deep stillness. When I was a young lad and first around, I'd always go up the front, sit right next to Bhante so I could get the enlightened vibes. But it was really uncomfortable because I'd never been with somebody so still. I don't know if you've ever had this experience. When you're with somebody who's really still and really deep, it makes you aware of how disturbed you are. And he'd lead these meditations, and at the end of the meditations he'd ring the 3 bells, and he kind of wouldn't emerge for about 10 minutes. He'd sit up and just look at the ground for a long time, and nobody would leave. And he used to say, you should take a long time coming out of meditation. You shouldn't sort of immediately rush into things. And this sense of his composure as he moved, as he bowed to the shrine, and as he went out. So the perfectly composed and concentrated. And of course, the Buddha was like this in the supreme way. And the Buddha comes last because, in a sense, I think the Buddha embodies all of the things mentioned before, because the Buddha is the embodiment of love. The Buddha is the embodiment of loving kindness. He is the person of loving kindness. He is the embodiment of bliss, of happiness, of rapture. He is the embodiment of mindfulness. He is mindfulness. You get these stories again of the Buddha sitting up all night with his disciples in the jungle, 1250, it's always 1250 for some reason, under the full moon, sitting in complete silence, completely mindful, just radiating a force field of mindfulness. And the Buddha, as I said, loved harmony, loved to sit in harmony with his disciples, always deeply concerned when there was disharmony, and did everything he could to heal disharmony. So he comes last because he holds everything for Vakali. He holds all of those qualities. We need, if you like, a personification. We need a picture of all of the qualities of enlightenment. This is why we need to bring the Buddha to life in our experience, so we can dwell in the jungle, so we can carry on with untiring effort both day and night in our Buddhist practice. Might sound like a tall order. It doesn't mean that you spend your whole night meditating. You can if you want to, but when you day and night, don't make the last thing you do at night looking at a screen. Switch that off long before. And when you lie down with metta and mindfulness. You have much better dreams and much deeper sleep. That's the effort you make at night when you let go into deeper awareness. So that's Vakali in the forest. That's keeping some suggestions how we might bring the Buddha to life in our particular jungle. I want to end by talking about Vakali's last hours, really, his last days. He did become enlightened himself. He had his own following of disciples. But he was very sick, he was very ill, and he knew he was dying. He was in a lot of pain, but he really wanted to see the Buddha again. He wanted to see the Buddha, even though he'd gone so far along the path. The Buddha was his teacher. He wanted one last look, so he got his disciples to take him to where the Buddha was staying, and they went to the Buddha and said, Bhante, our teacher Vakali is dying, and he wants to see you one last time. And the Buddha comes, and they're still teaching. He says, Vakali, why do you want to look on this body? He who sees the Dhamma sees me. He who sees me sees the Dhamma. In other words, he who sees reality sees the Buddha, but he who sees the Buddha sees reality. It's a really interesting teaching. And then Vakali goes off into his own, in parinirvana, off into higher stages to complete his path. But I think that's a wonderful teaching. He who sees reality, the Dhamma is the Dhamma in the fullest sense here, the direct realization of the way things are. When you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha, but if you really see the Buddha properly, you see the Dhamma. Both are true. So I leave you with that, to bring the Buddha to life in your lives, in whatever part of the jungle in which you dwell. Thank you.
Thank you.